Back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
Welcome to Die Hard on a Black, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is 12 Monkeys.
It's Die Hard in a time travel movie. Is it?
It's a stretch, but hear me out, guys. Hear me out. We are very excited to be here today because we have a very special guest. He is the director of such blockbuster hits as Journey to the Mysterious Island, San Andreas, Rampage, and the heavily anticipated forthcoming Netflix science fiction movie Atlas, starring Jennifer Lopez. Please welcome to the show, Brad Peyton.
Yay. I'm so glad that my mom could write that copy and send it over to you.
It was very nice to get that email from your mom.
I wanted it to be verbatim.
You're like Mrs. Peyton. It demands that you say this on air about her son. That was nice. I like that intro.
Before we jump in, I have to say that I have to thank you for making my childhood dreams come true, making a Rampage movie. That's very, very important to me as a guy who played Rampage religiously in the mid-'80s.
I guess you, me, and Dwayne have shared DNA.
It sounds like we do.
It's one of those games that it's just like, yeah. I mean, my dad used to drive me to the airport in where I grew up, which is a super small town, and there was like 3 games. There was Narcs, Strider, and Rampage.
Narcs.
Yeah, Narcs.
Yeah.
So imagine
that game.
My quarters just fucking
amazing.
Just going in there. There's the allowance right there.
That's the best. Oh my God. Classic. I don't think I played it on an arcade system till much later. I just played it on a computer. And then I was like, wait.
Yeah, this
is amazing.
I feel like you grew up in a smarter town. I grew up in a slightly more basic town, maybe.
I grew up where the Pilgrims came in, so go with that. How do you feel?
All right, you got a lot of rich
history there.
history there.
A Rampage at the Neon Retro Arcade in Pasadena. No free ads, but I'm giving them a shout out.
We have to go there.
We should. It's awesome. They have Tron as well. It's great.
Ooh.
Sounds like a fun weekend.
Let's
do it.
So, okay, guys, so this is going to be a slightly different episode than normal because, this isn't an action movie, and we have a special guest. So some of our usual sections won't really apply, but the reason I wanted to discuss this movie in particular is because I think this is Bruce Willis's greatest performance, and I'd like us to have that debate. However, hold that thought, because we'll talk about that when we get to the hero section. Before we get to that, I wanted to ask you, starting with Brad, like, what's your relationship with this movie? Did you see it when it came out?
With 12 Monkeys?
Yeah, with 12 Monkeys.
My relationship is like a wild fling into the future of like lust for like a week as a child. You know, I saw it and we were in love for like a week. You know, like it was one of those movies where it hit you and you were like, you're the only movie to exist for like a week.
Yeah.
But you know that it's like, it's not going to last.
Right.
You know, you're going to go your separate ways. You can't stay in the future forever. It's too much madness to stay there. Like any Terry Gilliam movie, right? It's too much. You can't stay in Brazil.
Right.
You need to get the fuck out of Brazil.
yeah. It's
like Brazil is wild.
Bounce.
Like a dude disappears into a pile of paper.
Right.
Like I can't live there. That's not comfortable. Like that movie's intense. That's the way I felt about 12 Monkeys. I was like, all right, this is super cool. I personally was a massive early Brad Pitt fan. Got on that wagon quick. Was like, holy shit, who's this dude? You know, like clearly like one of the most handsome men in Hollywood. And then he's like playing a lunatic. And you're like, okay, well, who's that guy? You know, so that drew me in a big way. And you know, Time Bandits, like all those movies, like I saw all those movies and like I grew up in a real small town. So like I was the friend who was showing people like Dune and Time Bandits in Brazil. Like I was that guy. And so I knew who Terry Gilliam was, and I was just like, okay, I have to see Bruce Willis doing basically what's sold as sort of like sci-fi action movie, as the trailer sort of puts it out there. Like, with him walking around in the snow and the buildings and the lion roaring and stuff. I was like, all right, I'm into this. So yeah, when I saw it, I was like seduced for like, a good week of just like, what have I seen? That's kind of what happens to me when I was a kid. I'd see like Dune or I'd see like 12 Monkeys, and it would just sort of like own my imagination for like 4 or 5 days. So that's what happened to me.
Does that still happen to you ever?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
Dune 2, the recent Dune movie, I saw it 3 times in theater.
Wow,
in a week.
Yeah.
My friends are like, you're a lunatic.
No, I think that's very normal behavior, personally. That's what I
wouldn't say it's normal behavior.
Well, for me, but look, we're all in the asylum here.
Yeah, well, yeah, man. Like, come on, this ain't a normal room of people. Like,
there was my wife recently. I was saying, oh, Tenet's playing at the American Cinematheque, and I can't go. I'm so bummed out. And then literally later that day, my 4K of Tenet arrived in the mail, and she was like, you have a problem. Like, you forgot this was coming in.
That's
I was like,
funny.
well,
Did you see this when it came out, Lou?
I saw it on video.
Okay.
So it came out, it's 95. So I think I probably saw it early 96. And it disturbed me. I was disturbed by this movie. So I think my love affair with Terry Gilliam started after this movie, pretty soon after. I think this was probably my gateway. I knew the Monty Python stuff, of course, but then I saw Brazil.
Right.
And I was like, this is one of the most astonishing movies ever made.
Yeah.
Then I got the Criterion 3-disc set, which I still have, the original DVD, and I watched the 3 cuts of it, and you read how punk rock it was. He screened it at night for critics to get it released, and I think the LA Times wrote a 4-star review, basically forcing the studio's hand. You're like, that's like a rebel.
Yeah.
That's like a guy who does it. Yeah, totally punk rock. And then I watched Time Bandits, and I definitely went through a phase. I have not watched a Terry Gilliam movie in a long time. So this was like relearning how to watch a Terry Gilliam movie when I was watching this last night.
I hadn't watched one in a while either, but the thing about it is they're so imaginative.
Yep.
He doesn't like let budget or sort of like shortcomings affect his vision. Like, he's going to do what he's going to do. He's going to find a way to do it. And that's where it just gets like, that's where the creativity kicks in, where he paints outside the lines.
Yep.
And that's what we all recognize when you watch a Terry Gilliam movie. It's not the coverage or any of the musical choices. It's where he paints outside the lines, where it's so wild that you're like, wow, that's brazen that he did that. But he does it like 20 times per movie.
He's also a magician. You can
feel
it. You can feel kind of like the handmade quality of what's going on in these movies.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's also the era, but it's like these things are built. They're real. They're really happening in front of you.
It's era. It's lack of money. It's creativity. It's just like. So I don't know if you want me to tell this story now, but I told you.
I absolutely do want you to tell this story, and I was about to ask you to tell it. So
all
please do.
So I grew up in Canada, and I lived in Toronto for 8 years, and TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival's there. Just by virtue of living in Toronto for 8 years, you meet a lot of people, and a lot of them knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I was trying to make it. I was like a kid. I was like, I don't know, 18 when I moved there. 18 or 19? No, 18, yeah. And so I got invited by this producer friend, Gabriella, who actually produced Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. She's a Canadian producer, Gabriella Martinelli. And she knew Terry, and she knew how much of a fan I was of Terry's. And Terry had a movie that I think she'd just produced. So she said, you want to meet Terry? And I was like, yeah, I absolutely want to meet Terry. Now, I'm probably like 22, 23, right? And so at this point, my I'm not that sophisticated, right? I'm drinking rum and Diet Cokes is like when I go out for drinks with my friends. That's what I'm drinking, rum and Diet Coke. So it's like you're
watching Terry Gilliam movies. That's sophisticated.
I'm slowly rotting my teeth out,
sure.
And I'm just pouring sugar into my eyeballs as well. Like that is. But like when you're 22 and you're a film nerd and you're you're trying to see everything. Like you're not looking for like the thing you can sip for 4 hours. You're like more.
Yeah.
Like I want all the movies.
Got to stay awake and get drunk at the same time.
Pretty much. Like it's a little bit of that. And so I always sort of judge myself about that because I would hang out with, Canada has a lot of like artists, like real artists, and so there's a lot of like, drinking the fancy drink and, you know, doing the fancy thing. I was not a fancy guy. I'm probably not really a fancy guy now. And so I kind of judged myself about doing the rum and Diet Cokes. And so I went out Terry went on stage. He did a Q&A. Within 5 minutes of being on stage, maybe less, maybe like 2 minutes, he poured a bottle of water on his head.
Wow.
Like he was just like, "Blah!" Like he did this thing where it's like, you got to wake up when you're making films. And he opened this bottle of water and he poured it on his head.
God bless.
Right? And I was just like, yes, this is everything I wanted in this, you know? Like I was like elated. And then he talked for an hour about, you know, making his movie. And then we went to like a fancy hotel, which I'd never been in before. I can't even remember. It might have been the Four Seasons, but I'd never been in it at that point. I just lived in a different Toronto than this that I'd been invited to here with the big producers and Terry and all that. But I sat down at this table with them and I sat across from him and they introduced me and he was super cool, super normal, like you're like the punk rock thing. At that point, I'm just looking up at this idol, right? Like I don't think of him as a punk rock guy at this point, but that makes a lot of sense, you know, like he was like jazzed up, he was stoked, he was happy, you know, he was just excited. And when they came around, they said, what would you like to drink? He went, rum and Diet Coke.
Oh, boom.
And I was like, yes!
That is amazing.
Yes! Because internally, you have to understand, like, I'm from like a pretty like poor, small, rural place where, you know, you grew up a little rough. It was rough.
Yeah.
Like if you went to a bar or you went to a gathering, there's probably going to be a fight. So you have to like suss the room out and like know where you stand, you know? So it's like, I'm not used to going to the Four Seasons. I'm used to being invited in these places where there's a little danger and a little edge and like befriending the guy who's like, oh, that dude's dangerous. I'm going to buy him a beer. You know, like that's how I grew up, you know, like, so I knew how to stay out of trouble, but I wasn't used to going into these places. So when I went into these fancy places and sat down with Terry Gilliam, and he was just like, basically like one of me, like he was one of us.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, okay, this is fun. And then sure enough, he's now that you say it, I didn't even think about it till today. It's that punk rock thing.
Yeah.
He's just got an edge to him. He's got a grittiness to him that's like admirable. Then he takes that thing the same way Danny Boyle does. He takes that thing and brings it to this new level when he goes and makes
personality is there in the movie, I feel like.
I think the DNA is in the movie, right? And so it's like that's the thing when you're like talking about Brazil, it's like undeniable. It's like there's his DNA. He's got this punk rock DNA right back to Monty Python where he's just cutting out pieces of paper and making animations. It's just like he's like, I don't need your money to make this what I want to make it.
Totally.
I want to make it what I want to make it.
Raw
anyway.
He's like an analog king.
Just like flowing out.
Like a child.
You know.
Like a child. Like there's naivete and he's like embracing it.
Well, it's the production. It's like he just can make it. He knows how to make things. And if he can, he seems to be able to figure it out. And I mean this in the best way. It's like you can feel it glued together. You can feel that there's a glue, and the glue is Terry Gilliam's imagination and then the actual making of the thing.
Did you guys did you interact when you were at the bar, like having the drinks, and where did that go?
I can't really remember. In all honesty, like you probably know what this is like too. It's like you get a movie that comes out and your producer is there and there's distributors there. It's like he's working,
right?
You know,
work in the room a little bit. Yeah.
He's just. I mean, it was just a table, but it was like 6 or 8 of us. But he had to.
Sure.
He had to do his thing.
He was on the job. Yeah.
But he was still super cool.
Yeah.
Like I've been in those environments and the people are like mostly younger than him, but they're like too cool for school.
Right.
And you're like,
yeah,
bro, chill out.
right.
Like,
well,
yeah.
Wow.
Your film is cool, but you ain't Terry Gilliam, man.
Yeah, there's only one.
Well, that's great. And it's a great table setter for what we'll get into. But before we move on, should we do some
top line facts?
Give us some quick fast facts to put this film in context. So 12 Monkeys was released in the US by Universal, which funnily enough was the same studio that he had the massive battle with for Brazil, which made the production history of this quite interesting, that they were able to do another movie together after all that.
Same people?
Different, I think largely different people in a different regime.
Oh, there you go.
But still, there had been bad blood in the past. It was released on December 29th, 1995, which was 1 week after the last film we did, Sudden Death. Directed, of course, by Terry Gilliam from a screenplay by David Peoples and Janet Peoples, taking partial inspiration from the French short film La Jetée by Chris Marker, which you've seen, right?
I'm a big fan of that film. Yeah,
it's really interesting because it's all static
photos and sound design and voiceover. It's great. I mean, Chris Marker's a genius. Yeah, big fan.
Really, really interesting source material. It of course stars Bruce Willis, Madeline Stowe, and Brad Pitt. And I was really kind of pleasantly surprised when I looked at these stats that on an estimated budget of $29 million, which is pretty low for a piece of world building that's this elaborate and ambitious. $29 million budget, it grossed $168.8 million. Huge hit for a difficult film. It was also nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Brad Pitt was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and costume designer Julie Weiss was also nominated for her work, although neither won. And it had huge critical acclaim and a number of other awards and accolades. So it was a sizable hit, and it really does, to your point, Brett, like I remember similarly, like this film makes an impression on you. It really does, like it kind of damages you. It like there's an impact to this film. And I mean, I have to say, when I watched it, I saw it just briefly on my history. I saw it, I think, on video when it came out. Loved it. I had the DVD, but it's one of those DVDs that I'm like, I'm glad I own this, but I never, ever watch it.
Yeah.
Except when I was watching it for this, because it does take a bit of a toll on you. And I remember I tweeted after watching it, like, okay, I just watched 12 Monkeys and I'll be crying for the rest of the day.
It's a tough movie.
See you later. And it was genuine. I was crying for about half an hour just because of the beauty of the sadness, and the
ending is rough.
Is so emotionally powerful. But shall we move on to our section where, of course, why are we talking about this movie on the show Die Hard on a Blank? Because we're going to explore the
Die Hard DNA.
So the first one being, the obvious one being, okay, Bruce Willis, of course, is the star of this movie. But I think this is a movie that it's so challenging. It's so heady. It's so tonally bleak. It's so sort of unwelcoming that it needs this big above-the-title movie star to make it commercially viable, and it made it this big hit. And I found out something very interesting from my research, which is that apparently Terry Gilliam first met Bruce Willis while casting The Fisher King, which Willis auditioned for, and he was particularly impressed. The reason he went to Willis was because he saw the scene in Die Hard where McClane is talking about his wife while pulling the glass from his feet. Was the scene that really made an impact on Gilliam, and he suddenly saw like this guy actually has real sensitivity in him that we don't necessarily associate that much with. We talk about it a lot, right? Because we're super down the Bruce Willis rabbit hole, right? But for most people, you think of Bruce Willis as the sort of wisecracking tough guy, but Gilliam zeroed in on his sensitivity. And he said, talking with him, he discovered that part was like ad-libbed by him, and he remembered that.
Wow!
And
I'd forgotten that.
Tried, they explored casting him in The Fisher King, and then ultimately cast him in this. So he had been. This literally directly traces back to that scene from Die Hard.
Well, is this also his first like quote unquote great performance where he's a lead? Like, I mean, he's great in Die Hard, of course, and he's great in Die Hard: The Vengeance. He's great in Die Hard 2. But it's like this is the first like kind of like mainstream, but also arty. I'm putting a lot of quotes around things here, but like, I'm looking at his filmography.
He tried it with this film In Country.
Yeah, that's right, In Country.
But that's almost nobody's ever really seen that. No. And it's one of the things I want to talk about when we get to the hero section about Bruce Willis and his career choices. I think that's I think it's probably his first mainstream, real heavy lifting acting lead performance.
Well, because he's in Pulp Fiction before this, but he's
not the lead in
and
it,
he's
right?
also like
he's one of three.
He's one of three leads, and
he's the lead of that segment.
He's great in that segment, but it's also not like it's not outside the realm of what Bruce Willis is already known to do quite well.
Correct.
He's great in like there's movies that he's great in before this, but this might be the first time where there's like, this movie had Academy buzz.
What's even what could even like cause a debate? What's the movie that comes out around this time?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I made a list of a few, but there was one last point I was going to make, and then we'll dive into that. Yeah. The other thing I was just going to say in terms of Die Hard DNA that amused me was that you could say that Madeline Stowe's character, Dr. Railly, experiences what Dr. Hasseldorf calls the Helsinki syndrome, a kind of psychological transference and a projection of dependency with her captor, with whom she becomes emotionally
That was one of the most
to.
interesting things in the rewatch for me is Madeline Stowe's like psychic state in this, or
She's
psychological
awesome in this,
state. She's great. She's amazing.
We'll talk about
She's amazing.
her. Why don't we take a quick break and then we can really dig into the meat of this one.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a twilight world.
There are no friends at dusk. Okay, so the first Anatomy of an Action Movie is the premise. So just for anyone that's unfamiliar with the premise of this movie, which was actually pretty difficult to distill, it's essentially as follows. So in a dystopian future, a deadly artificially created virus has wiped out the majority of the human population and forced the small number of survivors to live underground. In an attempt to understand what happened and potentially find a cure, prisoner James Cole, Bruce Willis, is sent back in time to investigate, but he is mistakenly sent back to the wrong time and therefore assumed to be insane. So with the help of a compassionate psychologist, Dr. Kathryn Railly, played by Madeline Stowe, the increasingly mentally fragile Cole attempts to complete the mission, find those responsible, and save the future. And the ticking clock is, can James and Dr. Railly stop the release of the virus that will kill 5 billion people and all but end the world? It was kind of hard to wrestle the movie into some.
No, I think you got it.
I think so.
Shape,
no, that's really good. Yeah. It's tough because you're like, also he goes back to World War I when at the first release of mustard gas, and like there's a lot of things.
Takes a bullet in the
It takes a bullet that they pull out, and they're like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we
Chris Maloney in a small role being like, there's a bullet in you.
Is there anything you want to say about the premise before we move on to the hero section, about the story? And
I'm going to be honest, man. I kind of hazed out while you were talking that premise because this movie is pretty dense.
Yeah.
This movie is pretty dense.
It is.
It's greater than the sum of its premise.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well said.
It's
well
much
said.
greater than the sum of its premise.
Let's just get into the main event here, which is let's have this discussion. I believe, moving into the hero section, Bruce Willis as James Cole, I think this is the best acting he's ever done on screen. I think, so we can start there, and then I have some other points to make. I have a list of other films.
This is the best acting ever?
I think it's the best. I think so. I think there are other. I think, and we love Bruce Willis.
We love Bruce.
We think we've talked about how we think he's an underrated dramatic actor, and how he sort of straddled. I mean, we just mentioned the Striking Distance episode where we had a wonderful conversation with Sean Fennessy about this exact issue, where he talked about how, in his words, he felt like that Bruce Willis was searching for a kind of complicated artistry outside and around the main trajectory of his career, which was built around the die-hard, tough guy, wisecracking, beaten down persona, right?
And a tough persona to get away from.
Well, you're not going to sign up for Moonrise Kingdom if you just want to be the tough guy.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
So that's the movie that
exactly.
When you
it's
said,
one you always quote.
I think of Moonrise Kingdom because it's kind of like a
French film for kids.
Yeah, French film for kids, and also him kind of commenting on his cop. The fact that he plays a lot of cops and things before. I would put Moonrise Kingdom as sort of a comedic thing. I also got to say, he's amazing and Unbreakable. He is amazing. That's to me the number one.
I was going to go Sixth Sense.
Okay,
yeah.
I was going to go Sixth Sense. I was going to go Sixth Sense just because he's more of the star. Unbreakable is my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Yeah, it's amazing.
By a million miles. But Sixth Sense is the trickery of the levels of his acting is pretty solid.
Yeah, totally. And he also has that energy to him that's so sad in that movie. That's really, really incredible.
Downplays everything.
Yeah.
Well, those are all great. I had them on my list as well. Of those would be the candidates. Also, Looper, and although
Looper
he's not the lead in it, and it is more of an archetypal type character, but I really love him in Sin City.
I knew you were going to say that.
You know,
yeah, he's good in Sin City. Yeah. Well, he's perfect for it. His face was made for a film noir. You know. I think there are different.
But also, he sets a tone. Sin City is such a hard thing to pull off with the whole black, white, red, and all that kind of heightened reality. It's like your lead has to set a tone, and so he manages to hit this emotional honesty, but then heightened thing with his performance, which then you're like, okay, this all works.
Totally.
Imagine if that didn't work, the whole movie would fail.
It's fun to do this because when you say like this X is X actor's best performance, all of a sudden your brain starts to go on fire and you think about like even the comedic stuff, the whole 9 yards or whatever, where he's just like he's really capable of a bunch of different things. He's amazing.
And his
Death
part in
Becomes Her.
Friends, he started in comedy, and
right.
and Brad Pitt was also in Friends, funnily enough.
And The Fifth Element, like there's just a lot. He did a lot of different things really, really well. But there's that core of the Bruce Willis-ness.
How many movies has he been in?
I mean,
like 50-something, right?
Probably. Yeah.
See, the funny thing about this is,
I'm Googling
it. It could literally start and end with Die Hard, and I'd be happy.
At least 128 movies,
this is what
according
I'm saying.
to the internet.
Like,
yeah.
We can talk all day long about how many great, but like if he had just made Die Hard,
it's so true.
Like if he, like I'm serious.
No,
like,
I totally
I'm like,
agree.
you guys can talk about this for the next 4 hours if you want, but if he just made Die Hard, I'd be like, okay.
Well,
done.
I think it's
Drop
also
the
an
mic.
underrated performance.
It is.
Yes.
It's totally. I mean, we talked about this before. Like, you kind of think of him as the wisecracker.
You hadn't seen an everyman who could like relate to everybody in the world, whether it's just like the thuggy guy or just the dad or the kid who wants to be something special but isn't. He somehow is the everyman in that movie to the perfect pitch.
Yeah.
Well, and the just that line, enough explosives to orbit Arnold Schwarzenegger, is like such a great line in action movie history because suddenly it's like a regular guy is in an action movie talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. Very few people could have pulled that off before he did, right? Yeah.
Well,
he's amazing.
Totally get it. That's totally fair. And I just want to make a couple of points about this performance, and then I want to ask Brad a very specific question about this whole arena. Okay. I just think, for me, the reason I would put this ahead of like Sixth Sense or Unbreakable, which are all great. What
about Rugrats Go Wild, in which he played?
That's up there for sure. I mean, it was a tough goal, and also we have to say Looper, or else our Eye of the Duck friends will be.
I
on
love
our
Looper.
case.
Huge Looper guy.
Yeah, Looper's good.
But it's such a physical performance as well. Like he's such a great fit. He's using his whole body, and he's so vulnerable, and he plays this. It's so different to every other character that he's played because he's like constantly powerless. He's so low status. He's always victimized. But for me, the moment that just makes it sing that I couldn't get out of my head, and the moment when I fell in love with this film and this performance, is the scene where he's listening to the radio in the car, and there's this sweetness to him,
where he's like a little boy again.
It's so endearing, and I've never seen that from Bruce Willis.
Yeah, totally.
And it was such a beautiful part of his.
I think I know what Gilliam's going after when he did
unlocked,
that. I think I knew what he was going after. He wanted you to see the little boy that exists in that story through Bruce Willis. Yeah, because that little boy doesn't really have a performance or like a role, but I think he wanted you to see the little kid in him, so that later at the very end when Madeline looks at young him, which is, by the way, that to me is the most like heartbreaking, mind-blowing part of this movie. She's like, "You're the man I love." This is like that Star Trek movie where Spock comes back as a little kid, and you're like, "What the hell is happening?" Like you have this emotional thing that you're just like, "I don't know what to do with this," but it's
complex.
So pure. It's so complex. And yet so pure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It taps into this like ethereal thing because the complexity and the purity, it's like the world in itself. It's like it's hard to grapple with. And that scene where he's like, turn this up, turn this up.
His eyes get so bright.
He's like a little kid. He's like a little kid. He's like a naive little kid. But so I think Gilliam was trying to show you like this guy and that kid are the same person.
Such a good point.
Well, I think that one thing you're saying that definitely speaks to me is that I think in a way Bruce Willis he's a historic stoic as an actor, right? Like he's not necessarily
like the philosophical.
Well, no,
version?
like more like he holds everything in, right?
I see.
Like like he's not necessarily out there emoting as an actor, right? So when he does emote, like in the scene when he's pulling the glass out of his feet or when he hears the song on the radio, it's like he becomes vulnerable. And he played so many hard asses, like literally glancing at the screen, The Siege, right? Or Unbreakable. Like the big narrative in Unbreakable is he can't get through to his son, right? Like they don't have a relationship that's real. So when he does stuff like this, you're like, wow, like this is a real person right here.
Unbreakable starts on the train, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I've just like I've been lost in work for so long. But that first scene, he takes his wedding ring off to flirt with the woman.
Oh yeah, and it's all on a one take. It's a one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're just like, think about the actor who signs up and he's like, the first scene you want me to show that I'm not like in my marriage, that I will like. That is ballsy for your lead. Listen, I work in Hollywood. There's a lot of people that would be like, yeah, Brad, I don't know about that. I don't know about taking my ring off and like flirting with this girl in the very first scene of the movie when you're supposed to love me. I am Bruce Willis. Like I am a movie star, right?
Yeah.
Well, and he like goes there and then you see how vulnerable and messed up. I'm sorry, I'm from like the boonies. I swear way too much, but it's just like
it's fine.
Okay,
we love it.
All right, cool. It's
Fuck
like,
it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, yeah, man. I mean, if you want to like talk, like we're like, we talk. This is
you're
gonna say fuck a couple times, but so like, yeah, he showed you in the first scene of that movie the underbelly of this character. I mean, it literally was the underbelly. The here I am. Here's all my flaws. If you want to kill me, like an animal, like you can bite my guts. I'm done. There's my underbelly. Mm-hmm. He was like first scene. And then it just unpacks that with the wife and the kid through the whole thing. This isn't a tough guy. This isn't this guy, the DNA of him is not a tough guy. Mm-hmm. He can be tough, but like a tough guy in the traditional sense, I guess what I'm saying is he's not a pretend tough guy. He's not someone who's just walking around wearing his armor. He's someone who's just like, I don't have to flex my armor because it's already there.
Yeah, no, totally.
So he's got a vulnerable underside to him, and he pulls it out wherever he can, wherever he wants to.
It's amazing. I'm going to have to rein in because this makes me emotional when I think about it, and I think about how I love that side of Bruce Willis as much as I love the badass tough guy.
Well, because they're both there all the time.
Yeah, it's special.
If you have one and not the other, then it's not special.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's
totally
one-dimensional.
Yeah.
But to this point, this is the question I wanted to ask you because you just it's a nice transition because you just talked about working in Hollywood and the psychology of a movie star, right? Yeah. I'm fascinated to know in the context that this film, which was as we've said, is a very difficult film, but doesn't get made without someone like Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
What is the best way, in your experience? You've worked with movie stars like Dwayne Johnson. You've worked with him multiple times. You've just done a movie with Jennifer Lopez. These are not only movie stars, but giant, powerful celebrities.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the best way to approach directing huge movie stars?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, both of the ones that you named there are like entertainment entities. Like they have a stratosphere around them of reality that is their reality, that is all about entertaining, all about they're producers of stuff. Whether it's Jennifer with her deal with Coach, or it's Dwayne, always dipping in with WWE. They're there to kind of create a reality, right? And so you're entering their reality a lot of times when you meet them. And then it's sort of, I think of it as like, I need to pull you into my reality. I need to bring you into what this is about. And they're willing participants in that. But my thing is like keeping it very, very simple and grounded and incredibly honest. Incredibly honest. I mean, it's every meaningful relationship is built on respect and trust, right? And they know I respect them. I've offered them this job. I've talked to them about it. They're interested in doing it. We've talked about what the material is really about. So they know I respect them. Trust, like most relationships, is a much harder thing to get and to earn. And my approach is really basic with these guys. And it comes back to who you are. So everyone's going to have a different answer for this, right? So every filmmaker you have on here, you should ask them this because it's going to be different for everybody. But my thing is I will never lie to them. Never. Not about anything. I don't lie. Like, I don't really lie in real life. Like if I have to like fib to my girlfriend, or what are we doing on Thursday? And I'm like, we're going to the zoo. And then I take her to something much better than the zoo. Then like, fine, I'll do that. But like, if they're asking me something, I'll tell them, like, you're not asking me about, did you like that take, unless you really, appreciate my opinion. So I'm going to tell you the truth if that was a good take or a bad take. I think you have to, I like seeing them as humans. I like relating to them as humans. I think it's one of the reasons why Dwayne and I did such good work. Like San Andreas, I told him, I was like, you're like blue collar Bond. You go in and rescue people, but you're not like martinis, you're beers. Like you're capable, like Bond's capable, but like you're not fancy. You don't do the fancy thing, And so I wanted to just relate to him as a person, not him as a movie star. Mm-hmm. So I don't know any other way, but it's like, I need to get to know you. I want to understand something about you emotionally. I want to know sort of what makes you tick, like a little bit of your fears, your insecurities. Like, yeah, you have to. And you can know anything you want about me. You know, like I give them homework sometimes. I'll be like in San Andreas, I said to him when his daughter died, like, I'm going to ask you to pray in this scene. And I don't want you to tell anybody what it is you say. I want you to know what you're going to say on the day, because you're just going to word it to yourself when you go deep to try to, resuscitate her. And he was just like, okay. And I could just see him, like, wheels turning. I'm like, there's your homework. Like, when you show up on the day, that's the most important. That day scared the shit out of me shooting that day. It was just like, oh my God, how are we going to do this?
Well, he'd never really done a scene like that up to that point, right?
No.
And it's a very powerful scene.
Yeah. So you need to recognize their superpowers. Like, so with Atlas and Jennifer, there's more than a month. There's probably like almost 2 months of material where she is by herself in a buck of a mech suit. Like, so you guys know what a buck is, right? Like a buck of a mech suit. So it's just sort of the interior build of a mech suit, which is up on a gimbal. So it's about 12 feet off the ground. And we've walk cycled, run cycled, jog cycled. So this thing gimbals like the suit is walking. Mm-hmm. And she's up there by herself, acting opposite nobody except someone who is talking in a closet booth that's sitting by my monitors, and his voice is pumped into the mech suit, and they're having a conversation. And at this point in the movie, this movie is so complicated that I'm just finishing up. I don't know a movie that's more complicated to shoot. She has nothing to look at. There's all holograms. Nothing is there on the day. She's on an alien planet in a giant mech suit, and we're shooting the interior of the mech suit completely separate from everything else. All the exteriors, everything that interacts with someone on set is completely separate. So we shot just her material in the mech suit. Then you have to drop that into wide shots, like you have to plug it in.
Wow.
And then you have to, when she gets out, go to locations and shoot her on the locations. Any actor that's not in and out of a mech suit. So we had mech suits that people climb in and out of. Super complicated. So the thing when Jen came up as a possible lead, I loved it because Jen's known for a lot of stuff, but being a hard worker is one of them. Being sort of fearless is another one. And what I discovered, there was an inkling in my head of like, she's a solo performer. She's used to going out on stage and performing by herself. This is the type of background I think you need to be put inside of a space by yourself to act opposite no one for months. Like, you need something like that mechanic. You need that DNA in you where that's not intimidating. Then you can just lean into the emotions. If you're intimidated, you're going to be on your heels. Like, like fighters always say they're on their heels if they're going backwards. It's like, you can't have a performer on their heels. They're not going to give you their best work unless it's like fear or anger. Because you can back someone into a corner and have them fight their way out, but you can't have them leading the charge on their heels. So I needed someone who was like, okay, I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to lean. And there was moments where I could tell that she was like, this is scary. This is crazy. Like buck flying around, explosion lights going off, like eye lines all over the place. I could tell like, she's like, this is nutty. But I'm like, I got this. I know how to do this. Like, I got this. And there's a sequence called Planet Fall that I think you see a glimpse of it in the teaser and in the trailer coming out.
Amazing.
Yeah. So in that sequence, I remember that was really early, and I remember like I could sense like she's like, this is a bit crazy, this is a bit wild. And then, but I was like, I got this. Don't worry. But we were both figuring out at the same time, because I only got the buck 2 days before we started rolling cameras. So I was like, I gotta figure this out fast.
Wow.
I mean, this is like going to the majors, and like you suddenly go up to plate and someone throws a pitch you've never seen, right? And you knew it was coming because you know, scouting report says this guy's going to do this. Yeah. This is what it was like getting the buck 2 days before camera. 2 days before we rolled camera, I got this thing. I had a foam cutout of this. I was like, holy shit, how am I going to shoot this thing? And I had to like live figure it out. Like, so the scariness of being at home plate with someone throwing a new pitch in the stadium with thousands of people watching you, and you're just like, okay, all right, gotta hit this ball, gotta hit it, gotta get on base, can't mess this up. There's no getting strikeouts when you're making giant movies like this. You gotta get up there. You gotta do your thing, you know? And so that's where, you know, working with her was really useful because she's fearless and she's that solo performer. And so I can be neurotic and freaking out in the background and going, okay, I got to find this. What is the methodology? We found the perfect methodology, by the way. Perfect methodology. Put 4 cameras on the buck at all times, bracketed 4 cameras, or had two bracketed and 2 operators. And then I built my performance in long runs. So my cameras captured, sometimes 4 cameras, the entire scene. And so all Jen had to do was do the scene really great once. I had the whole thing. Right.
And you had it covered from wherever you needed it.
I had all the angles. Now, some of that I had planned because, like, for example, you'll see the movie and there's one moment where she puts her head back and she's so exasperated with the mech suit because the mech suit talks to her. And at the beginning, it's just like a computer program. Like, she's like, I don't talk computer, dude. Like, get me the hell off this planet. You know, is basically her attitude. And you see her put her hands back, and I put the camera up on the outside of the suit where there's like this metal bracket where the glass is, and she's in a snowstorm. And so then we laid in the glass, laid in the snow. So it's like I knew that I asked her, play that moment here so that I could get this shot. You know, like I gave her a map, a basic road map. But then there's a lot of scenes where I was just like, you know, going, okay, there's a digital map here. She's got to look down here for an eye-line thing. I want her to speak in this direction. I'm going to slide the camera and move the camera around during these like 5 lines of dialogue. Like I had maps to it, but you know, when you're working with a star, if you don't get in there and build that bond and relationship, man, like every movie, especially these big ones, there's going to be stuff you're like, I didn't see this coming. You know, I hadn't figured this out. This is like making a Star Wars movie, except there's no like mythology of Star Wars that exists. I just had to. You
don't have that to fall back on, or
nothing to fall back on. Right. No tech, no designs, no.
Not even the familiarity with an audience.
It's all in the imagination of you and the art department, the vision,
and you and the art department and the star have to be willing and open and brave enough to embrace discoveries along the way. So that is. Jennifer Lopez in Atlas is my dance partner. She is my dance partner. Like, she's my creative partner in this movie. And you need to be on the same page because things are going to come up where it's like, what do we do here? They're going to come up unless you're making the sequel or it's going to get easier as you go. Like, if someone said, here's Star Wars, I'd be like, yes, let me go look at all
you have a template.
Coolest shit that I love from Star Wars. I'm going to take this and this and this and this and this. This was like, okay, so we have to invent everything.
Your world building.
Oh, in the maximum.
Right.
And so I think, like, to back to your point though, to work with stars, it's like you got to get in there with them. You really do. You got to create a bond with them. You know, I listen. Maybe that's naive. Maybe like some people are like, no, you just ask them where to go and do their thing. You know, but it's like that doesn't work for me. I kind of need to be in it with them a little bit. Like I need to be empathetic with all of their choices. When they have a hard day, I need to be empathetic with them. It doesn't do me, or I think anyone, and by the way, like, maybe this is just like, I grew up in a really small, naturey place. Like, maybe this is just like not the way the big bad world works, but this is the way I work. It's like, I need to be in there with them because if they have a bad day and their kid is sick and they're in a shitty mood and they come in and someone starts talking shit about them, I don't want to talk shit about them.
Right.
I'm on their side.
Right.
I'm like, I get it. You're a human. I get it. Like, I know this is a tough job. And
long hours.
All of it. All of it. I just think there's like no value in the negative. There's literally no value. It gives me nothing good.
It sounds like your answer, if we were to distill it into one word.
Please distill me down because I can't do that myself. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Like building trust.
Well, you know,
because they are going to have, I always think, sorry to cut you, just finish this thought. Movie stars have a lot to lose. I feel like they're terrified of making a bad movie. They're terrified of making a mistake. They're terrified of bad reviews or, God forbid, getting a Razzie or something or whatever. Like falling off. They have a lot to lose.
A lot of vulnerability on the line.
It's sort of, if you can get inside their heads, I would imagine, and make sure they feel safe and protected. And like you're saying, you don't bullshit them. You're direct with them. But most of all, they trust you that you are in it together and you have as much to lose as they do. Right?
Yeah.
Then that's just such a fantastic answer to a question that we're not usually get a chance to ask. But I do want to move on to our next section, unless you had a point to.
Well, I just think it sounds
make.
like you're an actor's director.
You know, like funny. I don't get any credit for this,
but it sounds like you are.
But that's how I am, and like I think when Atlas comes out, people are going to see Jen in a complete. This is not. I'm not blowing smoke. I think they're going to see her, and I'm only saying this because it's the single thing that always pops up with people. They're going to see her in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
She's very good. Yeah. She's very, very good in a way that like. Out of sight.
Well, some of us, I was about to say, some of us are out of sight.
We stay like amazing.
Like,
like we're
U-turn.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. She can do some really great work.
90s stuff. She was doing really stretching herself.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
it also makes me think. We did an episode on Heat recently, and that the famous coffee shop scene. That's all take 11. And he set up 2 cameras, and he let them go. So when Pacino moves and De Niro reacts, it respects the continuity of this is actually what happened in that moment because it's 2 cameras. Right. It sounds like the same thing. You're like, well. We got to let actors act. Yeah. Like you can't just you can't be like we're shooting 158 setups today. Like let's do 4 setups at the same time and let this person be an actor.
Correct.
Like,
give them the space. Give them the trust. Give them the space. I think one of the big things about being a director at a high level is knowing when to get out of the way. Mm-hmm. Like I don't need to be there and micromanage them. I don't need to do that. Like. You have to do that, but generally with younger actors, you know, like we have Sterling K. Brown, Mark Strong, Simu Liu, and Jennifer Lopez. And listen, I give them very specific like blocking, instructions. I give them very specific, this is what you're doing in this moment. In terms of like, this is what this is about. This is what this scene is about. Like just reminders, like just in case they're not there as present as I am because I've been setting up the shots. I've been feeling the singular moments just in case. And then I get out of the way and let them do their thing. And every once in a while I come in, I do funny stuff. I'll do like weird stuff where like for the last line of a scene, I'll have Sterling play them all to one direction. And then when our cameras come around, I'll say, now I want you to play that line all this direction. Because honestly, it's an either or. So as a filmmaker, I've done it long enough where I'm like, I know how to maximize everything. I know how to like maximize a scene and I'll have 8 different ways out of this scene because of just changing his. And
it's fun. You let them do a bunch of different stuff.
100%,
and it's like
100%.
Actors like to act. That's that great Jack Nicholson quote. I love to act. Where when he was doing the Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth over and over again. Right. Like I just want to act. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of times it's like letting a thoroughbred out to run. They just want to run. They just want to go. So anyway.
Well said.
Speaking of big acting, big performances, I want to talk a bit about Brad Pitt in this movie.
Yeah, okay.
As Jeffrey Goins, who is the villain in quotes, right?
Yeah,
as the story emerges, we sort of think that he's the villain for a while. Then the rug is pulled out from under us. But I know you said that you were a big Brad Pitt fan. You were on the wagon early, but I have a specific question for you guys, which just sort of maybe frame this conversation, because this was an interesting moment in his career. He, between being cast and the movie coming out, he'd become a huge star.
Yeah.
My question to you guys is, bearing in mind what we were saying about what Bruce Willis was trying to achieve by making these esoteric, quirky choices outside the main trajectory of his career and that persona, did Brad Pitt perfect what Bruce Willis was trying to achieve with his career? Has he done that?
Yes.
I think so.
He has. He has done it. It's undeniable. Just look at his work with Tarantino. It's undeniable. I'm a sergeant in the military. What?
Or like Burn After Reading with the Coen brothers, right? Like the stuff that Burn After Reading with the Coen brothers, who plays a gym instructor.
There's some people that will argue that wasn't a successful movie. What I'm saying is there are very successful movies where he is out in some other zone doing some other thing that completely work, and that movie counts on him.
Yeah.
He's not a little part. He's the movie. He's the guy. He 100%. I mean, it's one of the reasons why he's in my like top 3 actors I want to work with of all time. Top 3.
Yeah.
Because he can just do whatever he wants. He can go there.
Yeah.
He can go there. And like whatever his process is, I support it. I fully support it.
No, he's amazing. Everything he did, it's like he's like earns the full trust in a movie.
Early on, California.
Oh God.
Okay, first of all, Seven, one of my favorite movies of all time. Like I was just like, this is
talk about disturbing when you're the first time you see that movie.
But then you're like Legends of the Fall, and you're like, crush it. Okay, am I in love with him? Like what is happening?
The
right?
answer is yes.
This hairdo, I'm like, what is happening? Like who is this fucking guy? You know, like, and then later on, he's going off and doing these Tarantino films. Like, he could do whatever he wants.
What's his character's name in Inglourious Bastards? Oh, he's so good. It's amazing.
Remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, but it's just amazing. Like the first time he's doing this, or Snatch, when he's doing this accent in Snatch, you're like,
Snatch.
What is going on here?
Like, by the way, because I grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, I thought I was one of the few people in the theater who could understand every word.
Wow. Yeah.
Every word. That's what Newfoundlanders sound like. It was something like Snatch.
That's so funny.
I'd heard it said about Brad Pitt that he's like a character actor in a movie star's body.
Sure.
You know, and I loved...
he's Paul Newman, right?
I just love that he is able to do a film that's like all about him, like Moneyball, for example, which doesn't have any pyrotechnics. It's an actor's movie, you know, and
Moneyball,
he completely,
Fury.
you know, carries it.
Fury is incredible.
Yeah, man.
As a drama, though, like there's a drama. There's nothing else. You know, obviously you have the rest.
Well, that might also be his Paul Newman part, where he just, in the best way, he's like, I'm Brad Pitt, but I'm going to do this incredibly, you know, like open, honest
Lieutenant
performance
Aldo Rain.
without putting an Aldo Rain on it or anything like that. Also, he is a man who in his 60s can take his shirt off in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I'm not joking. Opening night, people going when that happens in the movie. A woman next to me gasped.
Yeah.
You
By
know,
the way,
like
also you could just probably wrap this up with Floyd from True Romance.
Oh my God!
course.
Yes. He's so good.
But that's what I love about it. He doesn't mind being the fifth or seventh, like in an ensemble piece, if the movie is good and he has space to do something really interesting.
I also love that in the Ocean's movies, he's eating in every scene. He makes these very subversive choices to have, like, you know, chips and queso, like in his first scene in Ocean's 12 or whatever it is. It's great.
I do want to touch just a little bit on the leading lady of this picture of Madeline Stowe, and any thoughts on her like performance.
I miss her. That's my thought, is that I miss Madeline Stowe.
She was ever present.
I did
a
deep dive on her filmography last night, and I was like, God, there's so many movies here that I love. And then she took time off, and then she was on that. I remember my wife watching the show Revenge, and I was like, is that Madeline Stowe? Like, it's like a breath of fresh air to see her again. I think she's wonderful. And I think she's wonderful in this movie.
Yeah.
She's kind of the like heart and soul of this thing, right? And her transformation is massive.
It's a lot to pull off, right? Because she's like, logically, she's like, I should run away from this guy, but emotionally, for some reason, I'm not. And to pull that off, everything she does feels organic, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, well
everything
said.
She does, even when it feels illogical, is organic because she completely finds the emotional truth.
The scene when she's sort of giving that academic lecture, before she meets creepy David Morse, you're like, wow, I believe this person is an academic. Like, I believe it. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you see an actor doing that and you're like,
Yeah. I also like how when she was signing the books, she doesn't really make eye contact with them. She's just doing her thing. Like, this is just what I'm being as friendly as I have to be to like get through this.
I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
Totally.
You know, my wife is a psychologist, right? So portrayals of psychologists on film are very interesting to me to see whether they're authentic or not. And this, because psychologists have to toe a difficult line between genuine, deep empathy, which is why they do that profession in the first place, like tremendous compassion and a little bit of objectivity in the fact that it's like professionalism. And I think this is just a really skilled performance, especially when you think, imagine shooting this out of sequence, like with a crazy fractured timeline and have this arc be so perfect. You know, for someone that starts off a bit detached, like you're saying in the scene where she's signing that she's like, I'm an academic and I'm a psychologist, and these are people and I care about them to an extent, but there's like,
but you have to live your life.
You also have
feel
to
that she has
have
an
a
inner
little
life.
bit of distance, right? And then she just gets sucked into this one case, and he ends up not. It's that amazing thing that you talked about earlier with the scene with the child, where there's an element of wanting to care for him because he's childlike, but there's also, she becomes in love with him as a man to some extent, because it does get romantic at the very end, right? Like,
well, but I think the key to that is that she's and she might be this in real life, but she's clearly an empathizer. She doesn't get sucked in my opinion. This is splitting hairs here. She leans in. She wants to understand her patients. Right? So when she's there talking to him, she's always going, Jeffrey, is that what you believe? You know, Jeffrey, is this? He's like, Jeffrey, or whatever. Like, he's like, I haven't been called whatever his full name is in forever. You know, like, she's actually empathizing. She's trying to connect with someone who seems to be delusional to her and trying to find a truth.
Yes.
And so eventually when he starts pulling down the things and you see the 12 Monkeys logos, there's a certain point where she's like, I can't rationalize just ignoring this because I've been looking for the way to connect with this person, and now that I am connecting with this person. So I bet you as an actor, she's probably that way.
I think that also is a testament to Willis in that, like, maybe it's our relationship with him being on screen for as long as he has, but like the whole time I'm like, he doesn't seem that crazy. Like that's the thing. It's like there's such a reality to Bruce Willis.
I don't know, man. Very early on, he's putting on a body condom.
That's true.
And then he's like, then he looks like a bug. Then he eats a spider to take home, which I was like, I don't think that's what they wanted you to do.
I had questions about the idea.
They're like, I like the way you're thinking.
Bravo, sir.
It's inventive.
And then there's the scene where he's wearing like the see-through raincoat, where there's a lot of snot coming out of him. It seems a little wacky to me.
That's fair.
Well, before we move on, usually we do a section where we're usually talk about action movies, and this isn't really an action movie per se, so I don't think it makes too much sense to discuss it, although it does involve Bruce Willis trying to save the world. What are your favorite moments, scenes, or sequences, or just to culminate our section on anatomy of an action movie, what are your favorite moments of the movie?
In 12 Monkeys?
Yeah.
Whew. Everything in the asylum with Pitt.
Amazing.
Everything in the asylum with Pitt is fantastic. Production design, it's the future. When they're talking with all the screens, that it's like somehow like the future, but like a Blade Runner-ish.
David Peoples.
Right? It was like I think they used technology that would have only existed before, right? Because they couldn't create anything new or something. Mm-hmm. So it gives this weird
dystopian,
retro futuristic look.
But I feel like that maybe this movie made that popular because you see a lot of representations of the future and why.
Well, David Peoples wrote
Blade Runner.
Co-wrote Blade Runner.
Yeah. What else?
I think the airport is amazing.
Airport's
I think
cool.
the revisits of it are really good, and I think. That conclusion is... I have questions about why David Morse was allowed on the plane, but that's a separate issue from everything else.
Because there was no smell to the magical canister.
That's true. But they're like, we should probably see what that guy's about. He has a weird ponytail. No, but it just felt like... I think that sequence is where the tragedy comes in, right? And the movie does such a good job of foreshadowing what's going to happen. And like, I don't know. I don't think the first time I saw the movie, granted I was 13 or 14, I made the connection that he was watching himself be shot. But the first time it's like a sucker punch. It just nails you.
So devastating. The other thing I love about this movie is the music.
Yeah, the music is good.
So unusual, that accordion kind of, I think it's extrapolated from a tango
Very
motif.
Gilliam. Yeah, it's a 1, 2, 3, 1. Yeah.
Really distinct and powerful.
One thing that I think is interesting about this movie is, despite it being, I know it was a smaller movie, but it does have movie stars. It feels like it was made by just a guy. Like the music choices are really, it's like a polka, right? And like, I just can't imagine going to the theater.
It's a signature. He's got. I think that what he did with this one was really interesting though, because he still managed to make like that weird musical choice like very thematic.
Yes.
Like it's the sound of the movie.
Yeah,
and like. Movies that generally pull that off are like Star Wars.
Yeah, totally.
Indiana
That's a really
Jones,
good point.
But he
with
has
giant orchestras.
But when you hear that chord progression, which is like we're all crazy kind of chord progression, you're like 12 Monkeys, got it.
Right. Well, and also the fact that a blockbuster sci-fi movie opens with a polka score, you're like, that is like made by a distinct person.
And Weird Al wasn't involved.
Yeah,
what?
Exactly. No,
it
really
totally works.
Yeah, it's great.
Let's move on to our something a little bit lighter.
Okay.
I don't know if you brought your tuxedo, but we're going to go to.
I did.
I definitely.
I only wear it. That's all I wear.
I don't leave the house without a tuxedo.
We've got rum and Diet Cokes coming up.
Perfect.
As we head to the Die Hard Oscars, aka the Action Movie Awards, where we're going to give out some categories for nominees from this film. Our first category is the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. And I had...
In 12 Monkeys?
In 12 Monkeys.
Oh, man, I'm not this prepared.
No, it's all right.
Phil does all the work, don't you worry.
Guests just get to have fun.
Okay.
I have 3 that I picked, and if you have another one, please say. But the 3 nominees that I had, the first one was just... I found this line really haunting, was when Cole, Bruce Willis's character, says, "I want the future to be unknown." I thought that was really like a brilliant line, a little diamond, actually. It was so sad.
What timeline does he say that in?
I think it's when he's
It's towards the end. It's towards the end of the movie, if I remember correctly. But
so what would be our present in the movie with Madeline?
Right.
Because he knows the future and he doesn't want to know it because the future's terrible.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I think he's probably, it might be like a lowest point moment or what, where he's real, maybe he thinks what he's doing is futile. I can't remember exactly where it's placed, but I just remember that
it's a good line.
Being powerful. The other one that I loved, and this was an interesting one because watching the documentary, The Hamster Factor, they debated whether to include this scene, but I think I'm really glad it's in the movie. When David Morse, as the villain, gets on the plane and the woman next to him says, "Jones is my name. I'm in insurance." I thought that was like a brilliant moment. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
bit?
That's the lady from later.
The lady
in the movie.
and she's from the future, so you realize that she's the backup plan, and whatever Bruce Willis has done is actually going to have a positive impact. So I love that line in that scene. But they actually debated.
I don't think I got that.
It.
Did you get that?
That's the interesting thing.
I didn't get 50-50. The line. I didn't get the line. I got the importance of her.
I got the importance of her, but I don't think I got that it was
that's why they did exactly. They have the same moment that you just had on the documentary where they like half the people go, "Oh, that's brilliant." Half the people go, "That went over my head." Yeah. So they debated whether to put it in. It was really kind of interesting. The other one, that my final one, and I thought this was great because it was like a thesis statement for this show, for why we love movies and the joy of discussing them, is there's a bit where Bruce Willis says, "The movie never changes. It can't. But every time you see it, it seems different because you're different and you see different things." I thought that was just like,
wait, he said that about the movie?
He's watching a Hitchcock movie.
He's watching Vertigo, which is very significant because then she recreates herself in the image of the woman in the movie. Like, that's one of my favorite, the thematic ideas in this movie, that like we can change, we can be different people, which is, Vertigo is about recreating a woman to be just like a person that this guy loses, right? Like Gilliam seems to be on like a bit of a essayistic, like he's writing an essay with that scene because there's some interesting reflection going on there. But yes, I love that.
That would
line.
be my pick. Dude.
Well, watching the film now as an adult, I was like, oh, this is a different movie for me than it was when I was 13,
like we said
14.
with Heat. Sure. Like I saw it when I was 14. I didn't understand shit other than shootouts.
Yeah.
I watch it now and I'm like, this is a film about marriage, about life, about your philosophy, about friendship, about, I just think that was such a great statement, about the magic of cinema.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'll go with that. That's my pick.
That's my pick.
Those are the three I wrote down too.
Okay, good. Let me check your homework.
That. Yeah, that's exactly it.
All right, our next one is the Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film, which excludes the three leads.
Okay.
Finally.
So
that includes Brad. We're not including Brad Pitt. No Brad Pitt.
Pitt.
Okay, because if you said Brad Pitt, I was going to be pretty mad.
I've got so for best scene stealer, Christopher Maloney as Detective Halperin of future Law and Order fame, and many other great.
Wet Hot American Summer.
Oz, he was amazing in that.
Oh, that's right.
John Cedar as Jose, the other time traveler, who was really great.
Yeah.
Christopher Plummer as Dr. Goins.
Do you guys ever look at Christopher Plummer and go, that guy was in The Sound of Music?
That's a head fuck.
Like,
I look at that guy and go, how are you Canadian? Your accent is otherworldly.
That is another thing that's interesting too. Yeah, I thought he was British, and then I looked him up and I was like,
he's Canadian, and I don't know why he talks like that. But it's amazing. I fully support it.
My final pick and my personal choice is David Morse as Dr. Peters, the ultimate villain of the piece.
Can I critique?
Why is that?
Oh, yeah, I'm curious.
Why would I pick him?
Yeah.
I just think he makes such an impact with very little screen time. I remember his performance 30-odd years later as being very creepy and very disturbed. And I'm mad for Morse.
You're mad for Morse.
I love Morse. I'm a huge fan of his.
So I think the one that stands out for me is the old man on the street with no teeth.
Oh, yeah.
Because his, hey, Jack, that one. And the reason is David Morse is creepy, but there's something about that guy, and I feel the same way about, I think you said his name was Jose, the other time traveler, that I'm just like, they're so legit. Like, I feel like I could meet those people. Do you know what I mean? Like, and not in a movie, like in real life, like, the trick with making degenerate or a homeless person or whatever, or seemingly a mentally ill person, is that you have to go like, okay, this feels really, really real. It doesn't feel like Hollywood nonsense. And both of those guys, especially the homeless guy who talks to him, it's like, this is, I think, how it would really feel. Like in Toronto, I grew up in Toronto for 8 years, and it was like homeless people, that's what the vibe was like when they come up to you. So that guy, for me, stood out in a big way because I know how hard it is to cast that guy.
It's a testament to Gilliam, like that he knows what he knows how to make it feel edgy. It's right on the edge. You know,
there's a bit of a Greek chorus throughout the film, isn't he? Like that type of character. Do you have a pick?
I completely forgot David Morse was in this movie, which is I mean, I love David Morse. I think my pick would be Plumber because I kind of came alive when he came on screen. And again, like, this guy is film history. Like, he's film history in a movie. That's amazing. I'm going to go with Christopher Plummer.
All right. Our next award is the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. I've got the guy at Madeline Stowe's book signing who asks if she's aware of his own work.
Yeah.
Which I love.
That's a good one.
That's such a great moment.
The guy does a podcast, I bet.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you should listen to my podcast. Have you read my script?
Yeah.
Frank Gorshin as Dr. Owen Fletcher. That's Madeline Stowe's
That's Frank
superior.
Gorshin? From the Batman TV show in the 60s that played the Riddler?
If you say so. Oh, shit. My brain just like, whoa. Whoa. That's weird.
Well, I just can't believe it. I love Frank Gorshin, yeah.
Lee Golden as the sleazy hotel clerk, and Joseph McKenna as Wallace, the angry pimp who, as he did in Long Kiss Goodnight, bursts into a room unannounced to physically assault a woman.
He's like, bro, I got this one thing down. You need this in a movie?
I'm your guy.
I cornered this market. You need someone to bust in a room and assault someone? Bro, hire me. Okay, we need that. Yeah. We do. We need that in this movie.
You're in. So, that's Frank Gorshin. That's amazing.
Okay. I mean, is that who you chose?
I didn't know if I
know who I should.
Based on that.
Biggest dick in this movie? Yeah. All the fucking people in charge of time travel.
Right. Yeah, they suck.
They suck.
They
don't tell him anything.
Yeah, they're bad.
I would be like, I just went to World War I and got mustard gas and you can't.
But that's the Gilliam's bureaucust thing, which he does so well in Brazil.
It is. It just makes me upset.
Yeah, but he's so good at the, like, these things are being run by idiots, He's so good at that.
Usually we would do best death, but there's really only one nominee. I would also. I think this is one of the greatest film deaths of the decade.
Really?
Would you? I mean,
even the way he goes. We're talking about Bruce
We're talking
Willis.
about the ending of the movie. I think that sequence. It's like an incredible short film in its own right.
Yeah,
that whole sequence is so. Yeah, it's a complete story. Everything about it, from the moment when he goes through and they pull out the sound, and then you hear the alarm go off of the metal detector. Mm-hmm. Just every choice, the lyricism of it, the Hawaiian slow motion,
the blonde hair,
the surreal nature of the exaggerated appearances.
Yeah. It half comes off when he starts to take his dive.
I mean, it just kills me.
Devastating.
I think it's just so beautiful. So for me, I think it'd be redundant to discuss that. So I think we could wrap things up.
I will say though, you just said what, best death of the decade?
I think it would be
of
a nominee
90s.
Of the 90s. A nominee for me.
Nominee. I got better.
Okay.
Wow. I mean, look.
I got better.
Well, there are plenty better.
Well, that's you're putting it into
up there.
Yeah. Okay.
Terminator 2 being
Terminator 2, excellent.
We're talking about Joe Morton.
No. Although everyone. But
did you guys like that? That I just did that. Or Jeff Daniels in Speed.
Yes.
The sniff.
That'd be a good episode to discuss best deaths of the 90s.
Willem Dafoe Platoon.
Oh, sure.
Was that
was
90?
86 though, right? So that
is a good death though.
It's certainly iconic. It's the poster.
The cover of the
movie. Come on.
It was the poster.
It's a pretty amazing death.
Should we take a break?
All right. We'll take a quick break and then we'll wrap things up with our Double Jeopardy trivia quiz. And we're back with the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz where the scores can really change. Brad, as our special guest today, you have the choice. I'm going to ask 3 trivia questions.
Okay.
And you can choose whether to collaborate with Liam on them or compete against him.
Oh, I'm going to collaborate probably because I'm just a nice person.
Yeah. You seem to be. Yeah. Most people want to collaborate. You know who you are that didn't.
There's enough conflict in the world. I don't need to add to
Let's all be
Maybe
friends.
we should remove that. I feel like if people do want to
talk about it later.
It makes me uncomfortable.
No, sometimes it's fun.
Such a people pleaser.
No.
Okay, question number 1.
Yeah.
All right. In the asylum, when Bruce Willis is sitting at the little table talking to Jeffrey, he's writing with his left hand. Willis is strict about being left-handed with his directors as he's left-handed in real life. In which 1998 blockbuster does Bruce Willis play golf left-handed? And there's a clue available.
See what I deal with in my life?
There's a clue available. You can always call
it a comedy?
Al Powell. No.
Oh.
1998 blockbuster.
Armageddon.
Is correct.
Oh, Oh,
remember the scene on the
glad we're collaborating
on the boat,
eating the golf balls at Greenpeace.
Yeah. And yet we were all like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, those silly Greenpeace people.
Those idiots trying to save the environment.
He's the hero of this movie.
Oil companies are the best.
And then he took his wedding ring off. It was a very ballsy move.
All right, question number 2. Bruce Willis and David Morse would appear together as direct adversaries in which 2006 action thriller directed by Richard Donner?
16 Blocks.
Is correct.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great movie.
So
Die Hard 5. Kind
Some
of.
people have made
Right.
that.
Yeah, it feels like it.
All right,
Great
here's
hangover movie.
Here's my favorite of this week, which I think is very apropos in Convoluted Corner.
Corner.
Question number 3.
I know.
What is happening? Am I in 12 Monkeys?
Well, we're an hour and 15 minutes.
Am I the 13th monkey? What? I don't understand what's happening. There's echoes. There's sound effects.
All right,
This
question
episode
number
cost
3.
$13 million to print.
What? I feel so special. I drove the budget up by 12, everybody. It was only $1 million.
By the way, we have to talk about that after this.
Then I got involved, and I was like, we need an extra $12 million for this podcast.
4 cameras rolling at the same time.
Oh, and at least like a lot of explosions in the parking lot when we're done.
Final question, guys. This is a biggie.
I'm ready.
Bruce Willis and Demi Moore first met at the movie premiere of a 1987 buddy cop comedy featuring one of this film's stars in a supporting role. What movie was it?
Wait, say that again?
So they met, Bruce Willis and Demi Moore met at a premiere of a movie. There was a buddy cop comedy from 1987, and one of this film's stars...
this film's?
It's Madeline Stowe. It's Madeline Stowe.
Was in the film. What movie was it?
Is it a thriller?
Buddy cop.
No, it's buddy cop.
You could call it a comedy thriller.
I need...
You know this movie.
I'm sure I know
There
this.
is a clue available.
Yeah, what's the clue?
Yeah,
you want a clue? You want to call out?
Clue.
Okay.
I'm going to be really mad when I know
See,
this.
I'm terrible with years. So when you say 1987...
Yeah, I'm not great with years either, but...
All right. This popular John Badham-directed movie starred Richard Dreyfuss,
Stakeout,
Emilio Estevez, and Madeline Stowe.
Stakeout.
Yeah, so Stakeout. So in a piece of complicated causality trivia worthy of the film itself, Madeline Stowe had a direct impact on the trajectory of Bruce Willis's life many years before they actually worked together. So I thought that was a good...
I can't believe I needed a clue for that. I love Stakeout.
A good bit of convoluted...
I haven't seen Stakeout in a million years.
You know what? It holds up, man.
Really?
We're big John Badham guys in general.
We love them.
Really, because you watch it and be like, damn, that used to be just a thing that could happen.
Right.
Make a movie like that.
Now, speaking of science fiction, as we've been talking about for some time, you have a science fiction movie coming out, which we've talked about. Tell us about it. Is it May 24th?
May 24th, yeah.
Tell us all about Atlas.
What do you want to know?
What's the concept of the movie?
Sure.
What's
so basically, when we brought it out, we sort of pitched it as Castaway in Space, but if Wilson talked back, right?
Very cool.
So the concept is Jennifer Lopez plays a analyst who works for an organization that is basically tracking an AI terrorist, the first AI terrorist in the world. And she goes on a mission to a planet where they've tracked him. The mission goes awry. She has had a traumatic experience in her past as a child with this exact AI. So she does not trust AI really. Specifically, she doesn't trust or like this AI terrorist. Like she has a relationship when she was a child with this person. Of course, he doesn't age, but she was, like 12, and now she's an adult. The mission goes awry. She gets stuck in a giant mech suit and ejected onto an alien planet where the terrorist is supposed to be. And the whole movie is her trying to traverse the planet and locate him so that she can mark him so they can kill him and get off that planet alive.
Wow.
And it's sort of like a sci-fi buddy cop movie because she hates the mech suit. Because the mech suit is annoying. Because he's just like, please put on your seatbelt. That's not how you load this, program. And so you unpack this movie that's actually about trust because she doesn't trust anybody because of the trauma she had as a child, and the person that she connects with first in a real meaningful way is AI. is an AI entity, which is the suit, while she's hunting the AI that destroyed her life.
Wow.
So it's a very interesting...
That sounds great.
Sci-fi action movie.
Are there movies that are inspirations on it? Like, are the things that you looked at when you were prepping it?
I mean, I don't look at anything when I'm prepping. I would say the closest inspiration is a tonal point, which is James Cameron's Aliens. Oh. Like, that's the tonal... That's the greatest movie ever made. It's my favorite sci-fi action movie.
So we went and saw it last, was it October? November?
Yeah, something like that.
At the American Cinematheque.
Yeah.
And like, my whole body was shaking watching that movie. It's a masterpiece.
It is a masterpiece.
It's incredible.
I've seen it on a big screen probably like 10 times. I've seen the first time I saw it actually on Canadian like cable television.
Yeah.
My family didn't really have a TV in our house for a long time. And then when we got a TV, I was probably like 10 or maybe 8. And then we only had 2 channels. So I had to go to my friends' houses to watch cable television. Mm-hmm. And the first time I ever saw Aliens was on Atlantic Canada cable television. And it was the extended version with the turret guns.
Yeah. Oh, God.
That's the first time I saw Aliens. I just thought that's the version. The second time I saw Aliens, I was like, where the hell did those turret guns? Those things were awesome.
I prefer the special edition as well.
The Sentry guns. Yeah. I was just like, this is what the...
I want more. I want the film to be longer, not shorter.
Yeah.
But he's a master. That's a 4-act structure with an amazing pace. Like it's not a normal movie. It's not a normal movie by any stretch. And so that's been like a direct and indirect influence on me. So there's sections of this movie, especially in the final act, that you'll see and you'll be like, yep. I totally get it. There's nothing about it.
Can't wait. That makes me so excited.
There's nothing about it that you're like, oh, like here's the thing that I really, really dislike. As a sci-fi fan, as a fantasy fan, a general movie fan, but really a hardcore sci-fi and fantasy fan, I hate it when you see a movie and you're like, oh, that movie is just copying that movie. I'm like, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, it pulls you out, right?
Well, it pulls me out because I'm also like, we know that exists. That's great. Leave that alone. So I tend to not do that. I also think like whether you say this to everybody or not, it's just like you're working with film people, right? And so they're going to pull their influences. The other people are going to pull their influences. So I'm not going to I'm not going to like talk about my influences. I'm not going to pull from my influences. I like when we were designing the mech suit, I ended up going to classic sports cars for the interior. And then I found Virgil Abloh. Do you know who this is? The designer. He did a brand called Off-White, and which partnered with Nike for like. So I like streetwear. I like design. You know. So this guy Virgil, very very famous streetwear designer. He died like 2 years ago.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, black dude.
Yeah, totally.
So super talented, crazy talented. He did a one-off interior of a Maybach car, which I've never been in a Maybach, but there's like Jay-Z raps about them. You know, like they're very, 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 they're $500,000 cars. That interior looks like Star Wars on steroids. It's high fashion luxury, but utilitarian. And so that's like I'm finding my references in places like that.
That's cool.
Where I'm just like, okay, the thing also, just like we were talking about with world building, it's like I have to build a mech suit, and you have to believe this mech suit has existed for a long time, and not think, oh, they just built this.
They just built it.
They just built this in a factory. It has to have this history, like you see when you see a Star Wars. You know, in Star Wars, you see, oh, those are World War II helmets, and those are hockey gloves from the 60s, and you can see all these like real world references.
It's retro and futuristic at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's also
and lived in. And
it's one of the things that makes that movie iconic forever.
And it's borrowing from the real world that exists for them in that time. Like they're literally just going out and sourcing hockey gloves from the 60s or whatever. You know, like so I was like, we gotta. Because now we're in a place with film where it's like we can build everything from scratch. You can just go and sculpt something. They don't have to do that. That's like less money. You got to go find the stuff, right? You got to source it. Aliens, actually, the interior where they're walking with the grids, you know, when they're inside the base with the awesome the scanners. That's all internal parts of planes because they couldn't afford to build the set, so they went and got airplane scraps. Her apartment, doesn't that like mirror and sink and whole thing look like a plane bathroom?
Yeah, it does actually, yeah. Wow.
Because that's where the production designers went and got their stuff because they didn't have the budget, right? So it's like that creativity thing, like that you don't have all the money. And
Mother of invention.
So but the value of doing that is that your stuff has history. Your world has history. Right. I had to build a mech suit from scratch. There's no chance of like going and like sourcing a helicopter buck and turning it into a mech suit. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You got to peel it apart, put cameras in there. You have to build this thing.
Yeah.
So it's really important to find references that are not from other movies and are based in the real world. So someone had to manufacture that car so that it worked, so that I can pull from that design and go, okay, that's my inspiration.
That also to me feels very Gilliam-esque. To be honest, based on the convo, just because it feels like taking from like real world examples. You're not just referencing other movies. Like you're kind of like, what's the world of this? No. You know, like the fact that none of this was shot on sound stages, right? It was all shot in the real world. Like you have to like make something from scratch based on things that you've seen. Yeah,
the more you do that, I think the purer your authorship is. You know, like you're not referencing other stuff. So that's always the goal. But yeah, I'm super excited about the movie. It's really big. It's my biggest movie ever. Jennifer's unbelievable in it. She's
Can't wait.
Fantastic. And it's got the whole cast is phenomenal.
And it's out May 24th on Netflix. Unfortunately, because we're recording a little ahead, we haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I'm going to watch
we've
it
seen the
first.
trailer.
Yeah,
it looks incredible.
Can't wait.
Atlas, May 24 on Netflix. Don't miss it. Brad, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, an incredible insight into your process and working with movie stars, your love for this movie, working in the science fiction space. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Double thumbs up.
Fantastic.
All my thumbs up.
He's doing both the thumbs.
All of them.
Just so you guys know. It's an audio medium.
It's also a Netflix thing because I notice if you really like something, you have to double thumbs up it. I'm learning. I'm learning the ways.
The algorithm.
I'm learning the algorithm, bro. I'm getting in there.
All right, that's our show for today. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend.
Next time on the show, Broken Arrow.
Broken Arrow.
The Southwest will be a quiet neighborhood for about 10,000 years.
Cannot wait. So join us for that, and we will be back soon with something.
Get out of here. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.